Is this a movie?
Mm-hmm. It's probably recording your voice, too.
I want to walk in front of you. That's about a book, don't you? About 5,000 books. 5,000 cats. And here
Languages and books, and 5 languages and correspondence.
Would you like to come in here?
Sure.
We have this entourage with us, so it's a little
This room we can talk about your ancestors, with the Sheltons, and Nehemiah Curtis and Nancy Sanford.
Which Shelton?
The Sheltons were Henry, your grandfather's mother's parents, the maternal line. So this is the family that founded Shelton, Connecticut.
These are the Curtises.
Yeah, I had
His
his
grandparents, I just told they were dad and wife. 1895.
welcome, everybody. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Mrs. Sidney Luzon to the Preservation Society Homecoming. This celebration commemorates the first visit of one of our city founders' family to the city and to the museum in 31 years. Henry Shelton Sanford came to the upper reaches of the St. Johns River in the early 1870s and selected the south shore of Lake Monroe as a site for a city of the future which he envisioned as a tropical paradise waiting to be brought to fulfillment. He put his heart, energies, and money into this to establish his vision. An agronomist at heart, a diplomat by profession, his efforts had early success. Before the freezes of the 1890s, Sanford prospered and had all the potential for a major port at the head of navigation on the St. Johns River and was also the rail center for Central and South Florida. General Sanford had established a firm foundation from which all of Central and South Florida profited. We take this opportunity to express our gratitude for his efforts to all who will listen, and especially to his granddaughter, who by her writing, world travel, and interest in the affairs of her nation has carried on his tradition. Welcome on behalf of all of us. I'd like to present you an honorary life membership card to our society. Diane Patrick.
I want to tell you a brief little story about how this all came about. It starts about 4.5 years ago. A man came through town. His name was Richard Dunlop, and he and his wife were traveling in a camper through the small towns across the country, writing little tidbits for mobile travel guides. And he stopped off at the Sanford Herald, where I was working, and he wanted a story done on what they were doing. And so I interviewed him for that, and we started to chat in his camper in the parking lot. And we got off on other subjects. And he told me that he wrote a book. He had just written a book on William Donovan. And William Donovan, he was known as Wild Bill Donovan. He was the chief of the American Office of Strategic Services during World War II. And he's considered the founder of our CIA. So he gave me a copy of his book, and he wanted to know if there was anything in town, anything interesting in town, because he's writing these travel guides. And I immediately thought of the Sanford Museum. So I brought him over here, and the curator, Mrs. Caskey, was here, and she started taking him around and showing them what was here. And she stopped at the portraits, and she started telling them about your family. And what we knew, to the extent that we knew. And when she got to Mrs. Legendre, she said, one of General Sanford's granddaughters worked for the OSS during World War II and was captured by the Germans at one time. And we didn't know much more than that at that point, because we knew that she had written a book in 1947, but we didn't have a copy of it. And immediately he reacted and said, well, I have just interviewed her when I was gathering information for my book. And of course we wanted to know, well, what did she say? What was she like? And he said, well, she didn't say much, and I don't think she talks to anybody anymore. You don't know the story. And we were left with the impression that Mrs. Legendre was somewhat unapproachable. So I don't know why we didn't go directly to the source when we were looking for her book, but we didn't. We finally went to the county librarian, and we had the title wrong. So that's probably why we couldn't find it. We were looking for Until the Sands Run Out. And of course the book was titled The Sands Cease to Run, but our county librarian used her detective work and found it anyway. So we had a library copy, but we wanted a regular copy. But Mr. Dunlop left me with that impression, and that Mrs. Legendre was not communicating with the world. I don't know why he left us with that impression. Maybe he just didn't get a good interview with her, but he couldn't have been more wrong. But that's where things left until just by accident in October I was in Charleston, and you can imagine my surprise when I was in this bookstore and I saw their list of authors who were to appear. And I immediately recognized the name Gertrude Sanford Legendre, and was quite surprised. And I asked the clerk, I said, wait a minute, we thought she didn't talk to anybody anymore. And the bookstore clerk person said to me, of course, she's very active in the community, and in fact, she's out of the country at the moment. So taking it from there, I contacted her publisher, Mr. Pete Wyrick, who's over here next to the mayor. And the reason she was going to be at the bookstore was because she had her new book out, which she has kindly donated to us, and we have for sale here for anyone who wants to purchase it. Mr. Wyrick kindly sent me the manuscript copy, and we read it, and Mrs. Caskey and I, and we enjoyed it, and I wanted an interview with her to do a story. And during the interview, one thing led to another, and I said, well, we would love to have you visit Sanford. And she, hearing about the museum and our interest in it, agreed immediately to come. So that's how this event came about. We don't have to look for her book anymore because she gave it to me for the museum, so I want to present that to Alicia. This is her 1947 book, The Sands Cease to Run. And I'm also putting a pamphlet on her historic plantation that she has ever since, and it has a 300-year history, and these two things can be part of the Sanford Day. And of course we know that Mr. Sanford was an acquaintance and the first diplomatic appointment of President Lincoln. But Lincoln said, a country that has no regard for its past will do nothing worth remembering for the future. And I think we can say that for a city, too. And so with that, I would like to introduce you to Commissioner Bill Kirchoff, who has been a lifelong Sanford resident, to tell us briefly the history of our city that we're here to preserve. Bill?
Thank you, Diane. Mr. Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you. That's quite a tall order to tell the city of Sanford's history, so it's a little hard for me to do that, so I'm going to use some cue cards. And these cue cards that I'm going to use, if you'll notice, they're postcards of various scenes in the city of Sanford, either what was in the city of Sanford or what is still available to see, or things that you might be able to recognize as being used for another use at this time. The city of Sanford, you know the history, the portion about General Sanford and the freeze of 1895. And the oranges were going to be the thing, and oranges were a big product here at one time. And they were shipped out of here by steamboat north to Jacksonville, where they either went by rail or they went by steamboat up to New York and to the markets. Later on, the railroad was finally brought to Sanford, and so that Sanford did have a rail link with the north, and the oranges were sent. Just after they did that came the freezes of 1894 and 95 and wiped out the orange production in this area. The Bel Air Grove is still has some oranges in it. If you go out and look, there's still some there, but it was very much damaged in our own freezes of this century, which happened in 1983 and 85. So what happened after 1895, when a lot of people got discouraged in the Sanford area, and they went back up north because they didn't have air conditioning down here. That's why everybody's here now, is because we all got air conditioning. Otherwise, half the people in this room would never stop in Florida. They wouldn't stay around here, it's too hot. What happened was that there had been a lot of things built here. There was the Sanford House, which was a big hotel. There were other large wooden hotel structures in the Sanford area, which were winter tourist attractions. The people would come to Sanford. They would come about December, just after Christmas, and they would stay till it got hot. And that would be in March or April, is when it got hot, and then they'd go back up north. All right, you can see in this picture here, and I don't want to put this down and scratch anything. This is a picture of the General Sanford House on a postcard. These postcards were purchased in the other oldest town in the interior of Florida. You all know what the other oldest town is in the interior of Florida besides Sanford? Micanopy. Micanopy is the other oldest town, and they both have historical Indian significance. Anyway, this was a picture of the Sanford House, which was just down the street where the new library is today. There's a picture of the General Sanford House in here, and if you'll notice, it shows, there's a map next to it that shows the intricate gardens that were in front of the Sanford House as they went down to the shore of the lake. Now, here is a picture showing those gardens in all their glory. And they were very beautiful. They had all kinds of different plants and things such as General Sanford had brought to the area, because he had extensive groves or extensive gardens to try and experiment with the things that he brought back to this country to see what would grow. And a lot of them were in this garden. All right, that is the garden before the freeze. This picture of the Sanford House shows the same garden after the freeze. And so it proved that some of these things temporarily had a setback, that they disappeared is what happened to them. Okay. Now, so after that, with the oranges gone, orange culture moved further south where it was warmer. What do you do here in Sanford? The railroads, where Sanford used to be a port, and then the steamboats came down, now that the railroad had come down, they didn't need the steamboats anymore. You could go by rail, so Sanford was just a sort of a way stop. But all those lands around here that had grown orange trees, what are we going to do with them? Well, there were some people at the turn of the century that found that the Artesian Wells that flow in this area, if you drill a well, and there's some in this park that we're in right now, and some of the other areas, if you drill down to a certain level, you get flowing water. And they said, well, that's nice. And somebody else says, well, wait a minute. If we clean this land off and we put tile under the ground in the irrigation system, we can use this water that's free, that's coming out of the ground, to irrigate fields, and we can then turn that water off, and we can dry the fields out when we want to. So they started growing crops. And here's one of the postcards from an early part of the century showing a typical farm of growing lettuce and a typical farmhouse. I think that farmhouse is probably in the middle of Walter Meriwether's field right now. Anyway, that they started growing lettuce. All right, after they had grown lettuce for a while, that was a crop that you could grow, but the thing they found that was more valuable was celery. And they found out that you could grow in Sanford the best celery in the world. You could ship it to the markets up north, and here's a typical celery field. And it has alongside the celery, these are little, almost like a wicket from a croquet set, and that holds paper alongside that celery. The last 2 weeks of growing the celery, they would put this paper alongside it that would bleach the celery and make it tender, so that the celery that came from the Sanford area with that bleached process was in demand in the northern markets. It was the celery. And these celery farmers could make a lot of money growing that. Some years they made fortunes. The next year they lost it all. But when they made some money, they went out and they built things. And where did they build them? They built them downtown. Like, they built this building right here, which is a bank downtown, and that was built by a New York construction company. They built the bank. On the other side, they built what is called Rumlin Anderson's building. And a lot of downtown Sanford was built with that salary money. So that's what they did after the Oranges left. Now, the other things that you do in a town is you have to have a school. So you build your high school. It's got to be the prettiest in the area. And they did a lot of work with it. They had a lot of intricate architecture that they put into the building and so forth. Now that, and of course, then we had the Florida boom in the 1920s. Sanford had to be right in there with Coral Gables, Miami, St. Petersburg, you name it. Sanford was going to be put on the map. So they went in, they formed a corporation of some of the citizens and the mayor at the time. This mayor we got's a nice mayor now. That one went to jail. And they built this building, which was called the Forest Lake Hotel, which was kind of named after the mayor, since that was his name. And they built the Forest Lake Hotel, and it opened in 1926. It opened for the winter season, from December through April, because no air conditioning. And the people from up north weren't going to stay around here when it got hot. All right? When the Depression came in the 1930s, this hotel closed, and it wasn't reopened until 1934. And after that, it became a hotel again until the 1960s, when it became a boys' school, and now it's a New Tribes Mission, which is a religious group which goes into the jungles of South America and works with the Indian tribes in that area. So those are basically a study of Sanford up until the 1940s. In the 40s, there was an air base built south of town, which is now the Sanford Airport. It's one of the longest runways that you can find in the world. There are some a little bit longer. It's very good because it doesn't have much ground fog in this area. It was used by the Navy during World War II and afterwards through the Korean War and up through in the late 60s as a naval air station. And there are people here in this room who are here because of that building or because of that being done, and other people who are here who have come to Sanford because of the naval air station. When it was closed in 1968, it was a blow to the city, an economic blow. But the city has recovered with the Disney World boom that we have. That's our code for Disney World. It just kind of never stops. And the Disney World boom has brought more people to the area, and they have seen Sanford. We have new buildings and new construction. We have uses for the old buildings that we preserved as best we can. The Historical Society for the downtown area went to the state and the federal government. They got the area designated as a historical district, and you'll see when you probably went on your tour, or you will go on a tour, we hope, you will see the different buildings that have been here for many years, some from the 1880s. And basically that's what I have. It's a short talk. This was a band shell there was a band shell out at the end of this pier. This is still here. All these things on here. This is our Masonic building in town. This is a clock. It's not in the middle of the street where we used to go round and round on Sunday afternoons honking a horn. You can't do that anymore because it's not there. But it's moved down the street one block. It's sitting in the park in Magnolia. This was the hospital. Over here, the high school. These are some pictures of the hotel. And those are the different things. These are some pictures on here. Is another picture of the hotel at a later date. You also have some pictures of different scenes of Sanford in the early days when they had rail and they had the trolley car going down the main street. And basically that's a short version of what we've done here, what's happened in the area.
Alex, I don't know it at all. I'm so pleased to meet so many people that live here. And I think the mayor joining me, meeting me at the airport is terribly kind. And I just feel very happy about the fact that my grandfather, Henry Shelton Sanford, will never be forgotten and will live here in this museum forever. Because I'm the last of the Sanford line, and it's very rewarding to know that he's going to be settled right here with all the memories. And And I'm awfully happy to be here. I thank you for a lovely day and very kind of you all. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
We have a luncheon prepared at the Chamber of Commerce. You can either walk over or drive over. It's a beautiful day, so it's nice for a walk. By the time we get over there, they should be, have everything ready. So if everyone would just kind of like to meander over.
Where would you like me to sign? Would you like me to sign it? Everybody sees it here. I just couldn't believe it. Unless you want me to begin the name.
Thank you. It does work better, doesn't it? You can tell I'm highly skilled at this.
Belgian furniture, big, two enormous beds, big pieces of furniture. And finally, we painted the whole thing white so it doesn't